I never thought I'd be in a standoff with an HOA over a cabin I built with my own two hands. But here we are. One minute, I'm enjoying a peaceful weekend on my lakeside property, and the next, I'm being told by the local HOA board that my cabin violates lake access regulations and has to be demolished. Demolished. No warning, no discussion. Just a cold letter taped to my door and some heated conversations that followed. They claimed I was blocking shared lake rights and disrupting the harmony of the neighborhood. Funny thing is, I don't even live in their neighborhood. Here's the twist they didn't see coming. Not only do I own the land where the cabin sits, I also own the land under a good chunk of their community. That's right. Due to a little-known clause in a decades-old land deal, I'm technically their landlord. But at the time they came at me, they had no idea. I stayed quiet at first, just listening, watching how far they'd go. They sent letters, threats of legal action, even hinted at bulldozing the cabin themselves. And all the while, they had no clue who they were actually dealing with. The arrogance was unreal. I knew I had to handle it the right way, not just to protect my cabin, but to finally put them in their place. What happened next caught even me by surprise. Stick around, because this story takes a turn you won't believe. Let me back up and explain how this all started. A few years ago, I bought a stretch of land near a quiet lake. Part woods, part shoreline. No neighbors in sight. It was perfect for the off-grid cabin I'd always dreamed of building. I spent months designing it, working on weekends, cutting the timber myself, and bringing in every board by hand. It wasn't fancy, but it was mine. Peaceful, quiet, and tucked away. Until the HOA from the neighboring development decided it was suddenly their business. At first, it was little things. A couple of emails asking if I had permission to build that close to the lake. Then, someone from the board left a printed letter in a plastic sleeve on my fence post, claiming I was violating lakefront regulations and restricting community access. That's when I realized they didn't even know the lake wasn't fully theirs. Most of it is bordered by their lots, sure, but the slice I bought years ago includes full shoreline rights. The kicker? When I pulled the old title records, I discovered something bigger. Part of their clubhouse, dock, and walking trail all sit on an easement that runs across my land. It's legal, but guess who owns the land beneath it? Me. That detail was buried in a decades-old document most people would never bother to read. But I did. And when I realized what that meant, I knew I had leverage they didn't even see coming. A few days after finding that easement detail, I decided to stay quiet a little longer and just watch what they'd do next. Sure enough, the HOA doubled down. This time, they sent an official-looking notice, claiming they were scheduling a compliance inspection and warning that the cabin might be removed at the owner's expense. It was laughable, honestly, but also kind of bold. They still had no clue that I wasn't just some guy who wandered too close to their lake. I was the legal owner of the very ground their fancy lakeside features stood on. What made it more interesting was that not all the HOA board members were on the same page. I overheard one conversation, purely by accident, while walking the trail that cuts through my land. One of the board members, a guy named Mark, was on the phone saying something like, "Are we even sure we have the authority to enforce this?" That stuck with me. Not everyone was as confident as the president, a woman named Carol, who was pushing the hardest to get the cabin gone. She even started telling residents that someone had squatted near the lake behind the scenes. I started documenting everything: dates, names, letters, even video of their clubhouse events happening on my easement. I wasn't trying to start a war, but I also wasn't about to be bullied. The more they pushed, the more I realized they were building their entire case on assumptions, not facts. And they were about to learn just how weak their position really was. About a week later, I got word through a neighbor that the HOA board was planning a vote to pursue removal actions against my cabin. I wasn't even invited to the meeting. They acted like I didn't exist, as if I was just some outsider. who didn't deserve a voice. But what they didn't know was that I had already spoken to a property attorney, and he confirmed everything I'd found. My land, my cabin, and their structures sitting on my legal property. I had all the leverage, but I still hadn't used it. I was waiting for the right moment. The night of the meeting, I parked just outside their community hall and watched as residents filed in. I recognized Carol, all smiles. Greeting people like this was just another casual HOA gathering. Inside, they had charts, diagrams, even printed photos of my cabin up on a board like it was a crime scene. I stayed out of it. Let them talk. Let them dig the hole deeper. I knew that once they made anything official, especially if they voted, I'd have every reason to respond. Then came the tipping point. A resident I barely knew reached out to me. He said he was concerned because Carol had started using HOA funds to talk to contractors about possible removal costs. That's when I realized this wasn't just a power trip. It was personal. She was willing to risk HOA money and credibility just to prove she could control something she didn't own. And she was about to find out how wrong she was just when I thought I had a solid grip on the situation. A letter from the county arrived in my mailbox, and this time it wasn't from the HOA. It was an official notice requesting a site inspection due to a permit complaint filed anonymously. According to the report, someone had claimed I built the cabin without the required permissions and was disrupting protected shoreline use. I knew exactly who had sent it in, and while I had all the proper paperwork filed when I first started building, the inspector's visit meant that someone was trying to bring county officials into a private land dispute. That move changed everything. Now, it wasn't just HOA members meddling with things they didn't own. It was a calculated effort to create legal pressure. And if the inspection didn't go smoothly, my entire project could get stalled or worse. I called my lawyer immediately. We gathered every document, photo, timeline, and email to show the inspector when he arrived. I wasn't just defending my land anymore. I was defending my name. But here's the twist no one saw coming. During the document prep, my lawyer found a clause buried in the easement file from years ago. Not only did I own the land under their dock and trail, but I also had rights to revoke public use if the HOA violated certain terms. And guess what? Their actions triggered that clause. I suddenly realized I wasn't just defending. I now had the legal right to shut them down completely. The day of the county inspection came fast. I met the inspector at the edge of my driveway, holding a folder full of proof. Permits, dated. Photos, survey maps, even signed correspondence from when I first registered the cabin. He walked the site quietly, asked a few questions, and before leaving, gave me a nod. Everything checks out. Someone clearly didn't do their homework. That alone was satisfying, but it wasn't the end. That same afternoon, I drafted a formal letter addressed to the HOA board. With my lawyer's help, I invoked the clause in the easement agreement. Due to repeated and intentional violations, including harassment, misuse of property, and unauthorized meetings about my land, I was exercising my legal right to revoke public access to the portion of land they had built on. That included the walking trail, part of their dock, and, most painfully, their precious lakeside clubhouse. The reaction was explosive. Within 48 hours, my inbox was flooded with messages from board members, some pleading, others threatening. Carol tried to play it cool, claiming there was room to negotiate, but she knew it was over. The very foundation of their authority had crumbled, literally, but just when I thought I'd wrapped it all up, a quiet knock came at my cabin door. It was Mark, the only board member who ever doubted Carol's push. He handed me a folded paper. "You might want to see this," he said. Inside was a proposal, signed by several residents, asking me to consider managing the land use agreement moving forward. Looks like the landlord title just got a little more real. I sat on the porch that evening, watching the sun drop behind the trees, holding that proposal in my hands. Honestly, I never expected things to come full circle like this. from being threatened, with demolition to being asked to help manage land use for the same people who tried to push me out. It was surreal. I took a few days to think it over. Not out of spite, but because I wanted to be sure that whatever came next wouldn't just benefit me. It needed to create peace and protect the land I loved. Eventually, I agreed to work with them on my terms. We put together a new agreement that clearly laid out the boundaries, easement use, and responsibilities. The HOA board had to back off and revise their overreach, and the residents got clarity on what was actually shared and what wasn't. Carol quietly resigned a few weeks later. No apology, no farewell. Just silence. Mark and I stayed in touch. He admitted that a lot of people just assumed things without checking the facts, especially when it came to lake rights and private property laws. That was my biggest takeaway. Always know your rights, especially when it comes to land ownership. Paperwork and boundaries matter more than assumptions and loud voices. Now, the cabin stands stronger than ever, and ironically,